Hey, it's Ryan with this week's Mille Lacs fishing report. We're at late July, it's midsummer, the weather's been a little bit up and down, and so is the fishing. We'll get started with some of the conditions. We're towards the end of the major bug hatches. We'll still see more of them coming up, but a lot of that stuff has taken place already. We definitely have some algae blooms going on out on the lake. We've got a bunch of snails floating around. I'm not really sure what that's all about. Coming up here shortly, we're going to be able to keep more walleyes, or not actually more as far as numbers, but they're going to increase the slot limit size. So we've got a lot of things going on out on the lake. Last week we were out here in jackets. It was in the 60s for highs during the day. The last couple days it's been in the 90s. So a lot of changes going on out on the lake. Sometimes that's reflected in the fishing. We've had some tough days over the last week or so, and we've had some really good days as well. What I will say is we have seen some pretty big fish over the last 10 days. It's not every day, but it seems like every couple days we run into some giant smallmouth. So we're getting some big fish. We're having some really good mornings. We're having some really good evenings. Sometimes during the day it can be a little bit hit or miss as far as what the bite is, but that's not really out of the realm for this time of year. We'll get started with the muskies. Overall this season, there have been a fair amount of fish boated. The people that I've been talking to, including myself, when I've been out, we've been seeing fish. There's fish being caught. I haven't put one in my boat yet so far this season. It's not that we haven't had the opportunities, but we just haven't had much luck on our end. Anyway, there are fish going. It seems like things are definitely on the upswing this season. Where I'm going to be focusing my attention is deep weed lines. Deep cabbage in that 12 foot of water range is where I'm going to be looking for muskies for the next month to 2 months. That's just the most consistent area. Deep green cabbage, that's your best bet right now. There's a few different ways you can approach it. Bucktails, topwaters, glide baits are all great techniques. What I would do is, if you're going out on a bright day, I would use a brighter color bucktail. If you're going out on a cloudier day, I would use a darker color bucktail. If you're going out in the mornings and evenings, topwaters are always a good choice. They can also work well when it's windy. But something that I really like throwing year-round is a big glide bait, something in that magnum size. A lot of times it's a 9 or 10-inch glide bait. The thing about glide baits is when the fishing's good, they move fish. When the fishing's tough, they'll still move some fish. So if you're looking to find some fish, if you're looking to get a follow, something that you can come back to later in the day or at a peak time, a glide bait is a great option. Moving on to the walleyes. Walleye bite overall has been pretty darn good this season. I would say in the last 10 days, we've had some days where the weather conditions weren't quite optimal and it would be a little bit tougher, especially with the heavy winds that we had last week, big north winds. Then it was a little bit tougher to get bit, but since then we've been doing pretty good. We've had some really good mornings on them and some good evenings as well. So the walleye bite overall I would say is good. I have focused my attention out in deeper water though. I'm not spending much time in the shallower rocks. That 8 to 12 foot stuff, I think there's still some fish in there. I've been noticing more fish in that 12 to 18, even out into that 24 foot range on the rocks. There's plenty of walleyes there. If you want to bobber them, by all means, I think you'll be able to catch some fish, especially in the evenings. But if you have windy conditions, a little chop on the lake, I think a guy with the live sonar could get them during the day still. For the daytime bite, I've been fishing deeper. I've been going to the gravel bars. I've been going to the mudflats, kind of depending on what the wind is doing. What I would recommend is a bobber and a leech is a great way to catch fish throughout the day on the gravel bars. You got to move around. You got to find some fish there. You got to use your electronics. When you spot fish, pitch your bobber and leech right out to them. They're pretty willing biters a lot of days, so that's been working well for us. If you have a little chop on the lake, you can do what's called power corking. You can use your big motor to drive around. I like doing this on the gravel. I like doing it on the mud to gravel transitions during the days because that's a lot of times where the walleyes are hanging out. I point the nose into the wind. I want a bit of chop to do it to kind of camouflage my boat and the motor noise. But I move along into the wind about 3 miles an hour or so until I mark fish on the 2D sonar. And as soon as I mark them, We toss our bobbers right off the back. Oftentimes we catch fish almost immediately when the bobbers get down. So the power corking is a great option, especially with a little chop on the lake in deeper water. When going to the mudflats, I'm doing things differently. I'm using a Lindy rig and a leech during the day. I'm getting the biggest, liveliest leeches I can. I'm putting them on light little hooks, 6-pound test mono leaders, 9-foot leaders with little number 6 hooks, rigging my way down the edge of the mudflats in about half a mile an hour, and just working that deep edge of the flats in about 26, 28 feet of water. Whenever I mark fish on my sonar below the boat, I stop and I pause on them and I let the leech swim up and do its work. That's what's been working best for me probably almost over the last month now when I go to the flats during the day. In the evening, it's a similar story. Bobber and a leech, just find a point on a flat, put a bobber and a leech on it. It's almost a sure thing. You should be able to catch some fish. If you want to get in on better fishing, what I would do is spend some time before the evening and try to find the biggest concentration of fish you can with your electronics and go back to that spot for the bobber bite. Similar story on the gravel bars. Go up on top of the gravel bar or find a rock pile on top of the gravel bar, bobber up there with your leech in the evening. You should catch fish. And lastly, the smallmouth. The smallmouth bite has been a little more hit or miss out here. Each day you can go out and catch fish. We're getting them every day we go, but some days are definitely tougher than others. What I've noticed is we put some really big fish in the boat over the last week and a half. We've had some opportunities at giants, and that's been really cool. Overall, I would say the bite is a little bit down, which isn't uncommon for midsummer, but we're still catching fish throughout the day. What I would recommend doing is, if you want to get out on the best fishing, you want to try to avoid the heat of the day, hit right away in the morning, go back in the evening for the last part of the day. That seems to be when the bites are at their best. The evening time, a lot of times you can get in on a topwater bite. In the morning, I would say you have the opportunity for a topwater bite, but typically what I'm doing is I'm spending my time pitching at rock structures with Ned rigs. I drop it out, let it sink straight to the bottom, and then just drag it back slow. That's what's been working best. Wherever I can find the biggest rocks, so I want to find spines of large rocks or transitions from rock to gravel with large rocks on the transition, or even individual boulders themselves, but that's what I'm looking for. Depth isn't as important to me as finding the correct structure, so I find those, and if I can narrow it down even more to a certain depth, what I try to do is find something in that 12-foot range. There are some fish out deeper. You can find them quite a bit deeper than that. You can find them all the way out to 30 feet at this time of year. You can find fish as shallow as 3 feet at this time of the year, but that 12 feet is going to be about the most consistent thing going. A couple other techniques that have been working well for us that work well for covering water and finding aggressive fish at this time have been spybaits. Spybaits have a time and a place. It's always worth having one tied on late in the summer. You'll find days where you just don't do much on them, but you might catch one big fish on it, and you'll find other days where you crush them on it. So it's always good to have a spybait tied on during the heat of the summer. Another bait that's been working well for us recently has been the swim bait, the little swim baits. This time of year I go with a little heavier duty version of a swim bait. Early in the spring I cast kind of more of a finesse 4-inch swim bait, but this time of year I go with more of the fat wide body style swim baits, and I'm banging them off the bottom more. A lot of times I'm kind of almost grinding them on the bottom. But using a swim bait is a great way to cover water. I'll pitch it directly at boulders, I'll pitch it right into large rock structures, but sometimes I'll just simply fan cast it out. Sometimes this time of year you'll find that it doesn't always take a specific rock to hold fish on it, or a specific rock structure, especially on a sunny day, the light little chop on the water. Sometimes you'll find fish just right up on a high spot on a gravel bar or a high spot on a rock pile. So oftentimes I'll take those swim baits when I know there's a high spot on that reef or on that gravel bar. I'll just pitch that swim bait over there and run it through. It's a great way to catch fish that aren't necessarily getting much pressure. I hope these tips help you out, and have a great weekend.